And we're live, hopefully. Right. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me. Hope everyone's having a good day. That's my phone going mental. Who's messaging me? I'm doing a live stream. Have some manners. Twitter. The bane of creativity. Hello, everyone. Right. Everyone has so generously come out here to hear me waffling for an hour. Hello, Sunny. Nice to see everyone can make it. I know as a Saturday night, people have got more exciting things for them to do, but thank you for spending it with me, where we will discuss the launch of my second book, Trem, Exiles. I have to say, Amazon have done a very good job with making sure that you don't sell proof copies by going not for resale in massive letters. So thank you for that. I will make sure not to sell them. And you can really see the difference between the page links on these. Funny story about these, actually. I'll save them for later. So, yeah, Trem and Trem Exiles, now all available on Amazon Prime and Kindle. Very happy about that, because there's been quite... I'll put this the right way. Oh, you're on the west coast of America. It would be nice. The lighting would be better if I was over there. But, yeah, it's been quite a journey with these two, and not one that I have any intention of slowing down on. Yeah, we'll get into it soon. But so the schedule for today is let me consult my phone before it explodes with Twitter notifications, because I'm clearly so busy. Right, the schedule for today will be an intro by me. Then I will do some readings, the first one being the prologue from the first book. Then, because when I opened the floor to some Q&As from some people who couldn't make it, there was quite a lot of recurring questions of, where you got your ideas from. So I thought I'll answer them in one fell swoop. And then I'll do the reading for chapter 1 of Trem 1, which isn't particularly, well, it isn't spoilerish at all, really. It's just mainly preamble and setup for the rest of the book. Then I'll open the floor to some questions. If you've got any questions at all, feel free to drop them. There's not that many there. I will make sure that I get to them. Then I will do the prologue of Trem Exiles. And yeah, we'll see where it goes from there. So, as I said, introduction. I think I probably came up with the idea for this book about probably the tail end of 2016. And I mentioned this on Twitter earlier, but anyone that would know me would think that sort of, especially romance, but fantasy and urban fantasy wouldn't be their first thing to peg me as, because they'd think, oh, you're into sci-fi, your Doctor Who's, your Star Treks, you'd think, that's more what you'd be into. And to be honest, they thought that was what I'd be into as well. But it was less a case of writing in the genres that you're interested in, more I came up with a plot and decided to write it and tried my best to fit the genres around that. So the initial idea was, I don't know where I started with Ghosts, but Ghosts was always in my mind. I think the very first idea I had was someone living in a sort of normal, a day-to-day sort of house, life, school, etc., but at home they've got the ghosts of Winston Churchill or Alexander Hamilton or any of them. Then I realised that that was the plot of a indie cartoon on YouTube, so don't want to step on any toes there. So instead, I sort of thought, well, I'll go back to the drawing board, but I like the idea of ghosts. Then, of all things, and this says wonders about how my mental brain works, there was a gaming session that I was watching online, and their game involved them going into a haunted house. And in that, there was a character goes into a room. This NPC is loitering in the background. They just sort of hold their arms up, and then a ghost appears. And I think someone says, screams, he summoned a ghost. Little click went in my mind there, and thought, ooh, ghost summoning. Now, what can I do a little bit differently? Because in my mind, the architectural sort of genre trope is something like Haunted House with Eddie Murphy. see how many movies of this ilk I've seen. You know, unsuspecting person or family go into a house. There's ghosts. There's usually a demonic butler. There's some lord that wants to take the fair maiden for himself or something ridiculous like that. But I thought, well, we can afford to turn the genre on its head a little bit. What can we do differently? Well, I mean, the first place to start would be that the main character ends up in a bit of a relationship with the person summoning the ghosts. That's already put a bit of a spin on it. There's no non-consensual. Oh, there we are. That's one of my favourite movies as a kid. Yeah, I remember it well. Thankfully, I haven't included any singing, talking statues in this one. Maybe that's where I'm going wrong. Book 3, I promise. So, yeah, I thought if I inject a romance element that isn't creepy or isn't trying to revive the dead body of his missus or something ridiculous, then I thought, might be onto something there. Don't make the ghosts evil, or most of them anyway. That's another good start. And the more I got thinking about it, the more I thought, yeah, okay, there's yet. Good point, Sonny. There's an idea forming here. Let's see what I can come up with. So, yeah, you will hold me to that promise. So I thought, yeah, let's see where the plot goes. And I think I spent about a few months sort of starting the idea. Then I wrote the prologue as I sort of got a vague idea where things were going. And I'm very... Now, a lot of people sort of ask, do you get writer's block or not? With me, I don't get writer's block because I'm an absolutely anal plotter. Like, the extent of plotting book 1 was, how many chapters are there going to be? I decided 20. What should be the runtime? I decided to see if you can get within 10 pages and whatnot, which is probably why it's the thickness it is. And then I thought, yeah, I sort of know where the plot's going now. So it's not a case of writer's block in that I don't know where I'm going. It's more a case of, okay, well, I know this needs to happen, this needs to happen. I'll just write the meat into those bones. And the only time I've ever not really felt the need to write is when I'm just a lazy bugger and couldn't be asked to write anyway. So then there is no case of writer's block. It's only your own motivation. So yeah, I kept writing. And throughout the course of writing this, I had, I think 2 members of family passed away, including my dad, both of which are dedicated to in this. And I think at that point, it sort of became, I suppose you could say it became therapy, really. And a lot of because this book being ghosty, it deals with the themes of death. I've always said when I've pitched it, it's always, the main themes are sort of life and death, and then how we look to our friends and family to help us. That's why there's a romance aspect of it. That's why Gabby Morgan, our main character, has such a good relationship with her parents. That means that when anything does happen, it means she can always rely on them, as it's definitely the case with, Sonny, an escape and an outlet. And thankfully, with the way my mind worked, and one of the good things about being such a big plotter is that if you know you want to do a sequel, then you can start weaving in a narrative that you can continue in the second book. Now, anyone that's watched Game of Thrones knows that foreshadowing isn't necessarily character development and isn't a great thing to keep doing all the time, because if you're waiting however many years for another book to come out, it just becomes frustrating. Thankfully, I know where all these, I know where the first few books are going, so, and shouldn't be too long to write the next one. And so, yeah, that's the sort of basic run through of book 1 and how that sort of came to be. And why I decided to publish it, there's a very good writer that we know in my local area called Graham Rhodes, and he wrote, I think going on for something like nine books in this one fantasy series, which is again about witches and magic. So it's sort of quite in keeping, really. And I thought, right, well, let's see what he does, because he self-publishes, and found out that he used then CreateSpace, which is now all under the banner of KDP. And as much as that was probably the most stressful part of this process, managed to get it done and published in July 2018. And thought I'll take my time getting the second book out. Now, I wanted to actually sell this at the local comic, Sci-Fi Scarborough. Pardon me. And that would have been today. That's why I'm doing this. But again, because of the joys of the pandemic, basically couldn't really. It was quite close actually. It was only a couple of weeks then when they decided to pull it. But it was the right decision, and I really commend Steve Dickinson and all the organisers for their swiftness in making that decision. And they decided instead to do the absolutely inspired thing of having the convention done online through Facebook. So I have a page on there, even though I'm mostly known for doing Twitter, and I'm finally into Instagram. It took me a while, but I did get there. But I've got a page there, but that's mostly for any of the local people, especially with our little bookshop closed. But again, that's been quite good for book sales as well, but I'll get to that later. And yeah, so this is, in lieu of that, this is my big thing that I'm going to do for Trem Exiles. Now, to not get ahead of ourselves, we're going to now delve into the first reading, which is the prologue of this particular book, which is only a few pages long. Oh, hello, someone from one of my servers. I'll answer this question, but actually I will save this for the Q&A. Okay, so I shall get in. Phone, naughty. I don't want to hear from you again. So, right, this is the prologue for Trem 1. That Place Sucked, which is probably one of my more blunt titles. 6 years ago, during a long summer, a girl was to make a decision that would change her life. The days were bright, warm and fun, mucking around like all children do. When you're in the back of Beyond, you could really do to spend... Say that again. When you're in the back of Beyond, all you could really do was spend time in the play areas, doss about in the woods, and work on the non-existent tan by the village's castle ruins. Mortsbury was hardly the excitement capital of the world. But on one particularly long, uneventful day of nothingness, Gabriella Gabby Morgan was feeling rebellious. If her parents were to be believed, nothing new there. Her friend, Manisha, was no different. Regarded by their peers as a bit weird, they could safely say that they were never really bullied. They were just left to their own devices. They were content with that. It just meant that they didn't need to worry about those pesky social interactions. It left them alone with more things... It left them alone to do more things together, like dares. Any child will tell you that there is nothing in this world more unbreakable than a dare. Oh, come on, Manisha, be reasonable, the 12-year-old Gabby called in the middle of a laugh. Manisha pouted as she tugged at her headscarf. I am being reasonable, Gabby. Look, you'll be doing the village a service. Manisha raised her eyebrows and gave a little nod. Think about it. Gabby felt herself deflate like a balloon. She did have a point. The dare was simple, yet it made Gabby feel nervous. Go over the moss-covered gates of the creepy manor into the edge of Mortsbury and see if this house is actually haunted. It's trespassing anyway. I'm not going to do anything really illegal. I'm too young for prison anyway, Gabby responded, looking at the floor. Manisha leant down and looked at Gabby, bending over in a funny angle to catch Gabby's gaze. You know you are too young for prison, right? If you get caught, the cops will probably give you a slap on the wrist and send you on your way. She reached over and tapped Gabby on the back. I'll be your backup. You can trust a friend. Gabby straightened her back. I'm starting to think you planned this all the time. Is this what you were doing with those dares? Manisha put her hands up and grinned. Guilty. You found out my cunning scheme. Gabby returned a grin. You sneaky bugger. The two shared a chuckle. After a deep breath, Gabby started to make her way to the edge of the village, with Manisha in tow. Mortsbury is hardly a large village. From end to end, it's only a few miles long, with not that many houses. It's mostly farmland backing onto the woods, which were mostly uninteresting save for an old derelict farmhouse and some rusty abandoned farm stuff. The manor house hardly seemed in keeping with the village. 3 levels of windows, all with shutters obscuring the views inside. Walls of discoloured, sandstone clad in ivy that could dwarf an average-sized person twice over. Everything looked untouched. Nature was left to its own devices, so much so that it was hard to determine the actual size of the manor. The gate that surrounded it was half rusted and seemed pretty useless in its role of keeping anything out. It was already open a crack. The walls around the gate were equally covered in ivy. It must have been untouched for years, decades even, maybe longer. Gabby hoped that meant that the building was abandoned. Any owner who was still inside surely would have kept it maintained. The sun was already starting to set. The dusk light bathed everything in a rich orange glow. The two would-be ghost hunters had their backs to the walls of the gate. "So you're staying here?" Gabby asked, keeping her eyes on the manor. "Yep," came the reply. There was a moment's silence. "Out of harm's way?" Gabby jumped when she felt something hit her arm. She was so relieved to see it was Manisha. If it were anything else, she would have had a heart attack. Safe to say that she was a nervous person to begin with, so her nerves were already pretty high. What good backup follows the first in line? I shouldn't even be the backup then, she joked as she peered over Gabby's shoulders. The still summer's evening was halted by a gust of wind, which filled the air with the sound of rustling trees. Rather unsettling for the two. Gabby felt her hand start to feel clammy, an obvious sign that she was getting tetchy. She swallowed hard and started to walk towards the manor. "Wish me luck," she muttered as she began the journey to the house. She pushed open the gates, which screeched so loud it might as well have been nails on a blackboard. Scrunching up her face, she held her breath as she pushed through the gates as quickly as she could. Gabby felt such a sense of elation when she was through. This was such a stupid idea. Why did she agree to this? She wished she could go through the walls, or better yet, turn invisible. Just anything that would make sure she wouldn't get noticed. She could turn back. That would have been such a clever idea for her to do. But she didn't. Instead, she kept going, her brain screaming at her to stop. There was a crunching sound with every step she made. Sure, it was gravel on the path, but it sounded so meaty to her. She knew Manisha was watching, but she couldn't bear to turn around, because no doubt the second she'd avert her eyes, there would be some jump scare like a bad horror movie. She reached the door. There was hardly anything special about it. The handle looked rather dusty. No carved faces with contorted expressions like she expected. The images of creepy manor houses usually conjured up as something more dramatic. But this house was just unsuspecting. Nothing about it seemed any more or less weird than any boring manor house. She'd seen more threatening mansions on those TV relocation programs her mother likes. She took hold of the door handle, really hoping it was locked so she could call the whole thing off. There was a low clunk as Gabby pushed the door open. No such luck. As the interior revealed itself, Gabby shivered. It felt like a sharp gust of freezing air hit her like a brick to the face. It was so dark, she couldn't focus on anything. The front of house comprised of a big, heavy wooden door, a flight of steps almost immediately to the right, and then a long stretch of corridor in front of her. With her heart racing, 100 thoughts flooded her brain. "Okay, you're in now. No ghosts. You can go." That should have been what she did. But, like an idiot, she let the questions continue coming. Well, maybe there's something else going on here. Why is it abandoned? Why is the door unlocked? Are there any people living here? And if so, why is it so decrepit? Stairs or corridor? Corridor any day. She was only wearing flat shoes, but she was getting really annoyed at how much noise she was making. Every step seemed to echo. If she knew she was going to be breaking and entering, she would have brought a torch. The manor was covered in dust, which did wonders for her sinuses. An irritating tingle set in her nose, and her nerves were hardly quelled. As she felt the tingling build up even more, she felt panic sink in. She tried rubbing her nose, not breathing through it, anything. It was futile. Oh, that sounded loud. Gabby was convinced she could hear something. She wasn't sure what, but she decided she should make her exit as quickly as possible. A pair of black eyes peered out of the darkness, from behind the banister of the landing on the manor's first floor. They narrowed in on the young intruder, and they were not pleased. With the onlooker's eyes still trained on Gabby, their head turned to the side. "Jenny, get her out of here. I don't care how." To anyone else, it would look as if the black-eyed figure was talking to thin air. In reality, the Jenny she was talking to was following her instructions, fading through the wooden floors like they were made of nothing. At the end of the long corridor was a room, which Gabby continued towards. There was a faint light coming from it. Evidently, the shutters didn't remove all the light from the manor. The room looked huge too, even if the details were still hard to focus on, giving everything a dingy darkness. Gabby looked around as she approached the entrance. She could see the back of something. It looked like the back of someone's head. The owner, maybe? It's probably not a good idea to do so, but she was on a ball with bad ideas, so she called out. Hello? Gabby called. At least she could explain things. It was a stupid dare. She didn't mean to intrude and she didn't steal anything, so there was no need to call the police. The figure didn't answer, or even seem to notice her. She took a few steps forward, entering the room. The figure's head slowly began turning, and Gabby halted when she saw the figure's eyes. They were blue, bright and almost glowing in the darkness. She looked to be in her late 20s in a plain white dress. Her short, bright blonde hair waved, as if it was underwater. Gabby immediately took a huge stride backwards. Her mouth was agape, and she started shaking violently. The pale woman was some kind of bloody ghost. Her theory was only confirmed further when the woman walked through the sofa like it was made of nothing. She began approaching Gabby very slowly. Okay, no, she was not dying today. She took a deep breath and held it tightly in her lungs. Hello, came the voice from the spirit. Gabby could have sworn she detected a broad Brooklyn accent, but that was totally irrelevant as she was about to be violently haunted. She decided to run at full speed in the opposite direction, wavered only by her shoulder colliding with a suit of armor she didn't even notice was there. She ran as fast as she could. She was not going to hang around for anyone or anything. She had clearly flown too close to the sun, and she was now paying for it. She teared past the staircase and bashed through the doors. The rush of warm air came as a relief, but she was still not out of danger yet. Gabby slammed open the gate and ran straight past Manisha. Her friend looked bewildered as she semi-noticed her friend shooting past her at a seeming 12 miles an hour. Hey, Gabby, wait, she called as she followed, trying to keep up with her friend. She turned the corner and looked around. She heard a sniff and turned to the left, looking down. Gabby was sitting against a bush, and she was hugging her legs. Gabby, Manisha called. She sank down to a friend's level and put an arm around her shoulder. What happened? Gabby wiped her eyes. I'm going mad. I've legitimately lost my bloody mind, she muttered as she took a deep breath. What the hell happened in there? She pulled her headscarf out of the way. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have baited you. That was really cruel of me. Gabby just shook her head. It's my fault for doing it. Manisha rested her forehead on Gabby's, her voice almost a whisper. What did you see? Gabby looked up and stared into her friend's eyes. I don't know. It could have been anything. I mean, it was kind of dark. Gabby ran her hands through her hair. It was nothing. I just got spooked by something, I guess. Manisha took her hand. Will you be okay? Gabby sniffed and cracked a half smile. Manisha, when have I ever been anything but okay? When Alvin Stray died in Lemuria Rising? This caused Gabby to blush and lightly smack Manisha's shoulder. Shut up! That left me emotionally vulnerable. Using her favourite show against her. How sneaky of Manisha. Manisha chuckled as she kept smiling as she patted a friend on the back. You sure you'll be okay? Yeah, came the muted response. Manisha helped Gabby up and brushed the dust off her friend. Let's put the whole thing behind us, okay? No hard feelings? After a few seconds of silence, Manisha added, Background mine for movies? Gabby sighed. Go on, you're forgiven, for now. Like you say, let's just pretend this didn't happen, okay? Manisha nodded and led Gabby down the gravel-covered streets and back to her home. The rest of the day was spent in front of the TV, watching horror movies, chugging popcorn and snacks by the bucket load. Gabby was still plagued by what she saw. It must have been a hallucination, a trick of the light, something. Maybe the house was owned by someone who had really, really bad cataracts. Some freaky projection, a joke played on her by the owners of the house. There was no such thing as ghosts. There can't be, not outside of her collection of horror movies, comics and novels. Gabby would go to sleep that night still thinking of what she saw. To her, she could rationalise all she wanted, but nothing could provide a satisfactory answer in her mind. No, what she saw was a pale woman who looked like a Hollywood movie star walking through a solid object, coming to haunt her till she was a shaking mess. After a few weeks, it was a distant memory. It still lingered on. If she lingered on it, told people about it, ranted and raved about what she saw, she'd be another mad nut job. The months passed, and Gabby and Manisha continued their lives, as if that strange day never happened. 6 years later, the two former girls had turned into young women, both 18. Between them, nothing had changed. Their friendship only grew stronger. Now they were on the verge of their college A-levels. The results, an already stressful day. 2 years of hard work hanging in the balance of what was written on a piece of paper. But for Gabby, the hot summer's day would prove to be even more important to her. The life of Gabby Morgan was never to be the same. And that is the prologue of chapter 1, of book 1 rather. Considering how long that took, actually, I might actually be running out of time to do chapter 1 and the prologue of book 2, so we'll see how that goes. Now, let's see what the schedule says. Okay. Thank you, Warren. Thank you indeed. Okay, so let's start half the Q&A. Okay, let's see what you've had to say. What's been your approach to marketing? Do you purchase ads or do you do the opposite and let the quality of the book speak for itself and let word of mouth take care of the rest? There is 2 ways of doing it that I found online, and I've stuck to the latter. Basically, I've been writing on a budget. I don't have a lot of money that I can put into this, so as a result, I've seen completely different opinions on, say, the Amazon purchase ads or the Facebook ads. I've seen probably about half and half say, it's great, do it, or it's not great, don't waste your time. So it doesn't seem to have a lot of rhyme or reason behind it. I can't really gain a consensus on it. Not one that I can sort of definitively say yes or yes to one or the other. So at the moment, I'm sort of letting word of mouth and stuff I've put online do it for me. And that is probably the hardest part of it, really. I mean, I've seen sort of authors talk about the I've seen the authors talk about the marketing process, and they have said that that is quite a hard thing. I mean, a lot of people would say or ask, is that because you self-publish? Not really. That's the most surprising thing, because I've seen people who are, they spend years querying and they finally get to a publisher and they will publish it, but they'll say, you've got to do the marketing. And probably the most tragic story I heard recently was someone said a publisher has read my manuscript, they love it, but they've had to reject it because they've only had 100 Twitter followers or something ridiculous. And that just boggled my mind, because I thought, you are publishing it. Is there any, sort of leeway you can do? Evidently not. So, yeah, that's why I've been doing it. And I'm of the probably quite unique position of being the co-owner and barista of a family-run coffee shop where we live, just up the road, actually. Very nice. Again, we've had to shut because of the virus, and there's probably been the best sales I've had of the book, not just to friends or family, actually. Quite a few people have just sort of not been bored by my ramblings and said, okay, I'll give it a go. So when we open, we'll have a shiny new copy for anyone who's already bought it to have a look at. And as Sonny said, it all comes down to money. It's amazing how many publishers will try and fleece you out of it. I mean, again, the horror stories I've heard, thank you. Have you had any ideas you've had to remove due to budget, time constraints, or any other reason? Not massively. When it comes to plot ideas, because I've done everything so far in advance, I've sort of been able to sort of account for that. Probably the biggest addition, really. It's not as much stuff to be removed. It was actually because this book was actually running the risk of being either a lot shorter or a lot duller with its pace. There is a sequence in this that only really came about because of a family holiday to Liverpool. Now, someone out there would appreciate that. And basically, it's 2 whole chapters that provide probably the biggest relief in the book from all the drama and angst. And that only came about when we went to see Wicked at Liverpool. So, if anything, it's sort of quite the opposite, really. It's more, I've now added stuff in. And then there's been little things like character moments or character revelations that, while writing it, I just thought, ooh, yeah, I'll keep that. Probably the no, not at all, Sunny. Your random ideas are brilliant. I think probably the one I did have to remove was there's I think about a 2 or 3 chapter long sequence in book 1 that involves hunting some ghosts. And that was going to be a bigger thing than what I made it out to be. But when it was sort of came down to the crunch, I decided that there was probably too much in the book already. And the one big review I had for this, which has been brilliant, really insightful, said that there is a bit of pacing issues in the end. And I can see that, because I'm not going to say it was an exercise in padding at all, but it was a case of, we need to get our main characters out doing something. It's already another challenge that realistically you could cut out. So if there's any adaptations in the future, I wish I can cut that out. How long have you had this idea for a story? I think about 4 years now. And the good thing is that I've got absolutely no ambition to stop writing these. I've got a 3rd book planned to sort of complete the trifecta. And then there's future stories that I will discuss at a later date. So let me consult some of the other questions we've got, because I had some sent in from some people who weren't able to attend. Where do you see the books going? Hopefully still on Amazon, but terrible humour. In terms of plot progression, as I say, I've got 3 stories with Gabby and Trem, and then how many more? Probably about 3 or 4 more to sort of continue to build this world, because with the non-human element on this, the Manzazu, which are our lead character, she comes from this whole world, this whole magical world that's hidden from ours. So I would love to have more books to explore that, and that is hopefully where the series will go. Sort of, we've established a status quo with the humans, and now sort of slowly drip feeding this world into them. And then once they get comfortable with that, then there will be more things dedicated specifically to showing that world off. And anyone who's mutuals with me on DMs will know that that's most of the things I talk about. What's been your favourite chapter you wrote in the upcoming book? I can't remember which chapter it is, probably 13 and 14, which was the inspired by Liverpool scene, which, without giving anything away, anyone that's listened to Wicked the musical, all I will say is the song One Short Day was the big inspiration there. So that was, that's probably the best way to describe that. And before then, the sort of things leading up to it, if you want to equate it to musicals, Anastasia's Journey to the Past. So, not saying that this book is particularly heavy going when it comes to feels or anything, but it's has quite a big period of darkness, followed by 2 chapters of just hopefully, if the intention's true, fun. So if that's coming through, then that's hopefully my job done brilliantly. Sweet question. How's your mother? She is doing very well. I put this at the dedication. She has been my editor, and it's a cross between her and my aunt that lives in Australia, who's been proofreading everything. So between them, the ladies in my family have been absolutely instrumental in making everything tick. So I owe a lot to them, and I'm very thankful for them. So yeah, she is doing fine. Caroline, have you always wanted to be a writer? Well, I've been writing since I was about 6. I have vivid memories of the first thing that I properly wrote, which was a terrible Star Wars fan fiction just after Attack of the Clones came out. So that dates it. But my original ambition was actually sort of go into the acting side of things, because I'd already done some acting with some local people. Fell out with all of them because we weren't getting along. Oops. Not because I was being aggressive or anything. They just really weren't ticking with me. And I think that was starting to kind of kill the acting bug, if you will. And then I did... Oh, I see what you're doing, Bellum. Yeah, so that started the slow descent of killing the acting bug. Then I was an extra in a movie, and this movie was... Now, it was a thing where everyone in the local sort of Amdrams and whatnot, everyone in sort of interested in this was invited along to sort of take part, whether it be in front of the camera or behind the camera. There was someone who I'm mutuals with on Twitter who was behind the camera, and he had a great time. It was actually on the same day Jodie Whittaker was announced as the Doctor. But yeah, for me, in front of the camera, misery. Absolute misery. The lead actress, we were all there at the crack of dawn. The lead actress rocked up like 3 hours later in her own time, swanned in like she was, you know, the queen, came in and did her scenes while we were all sweating, and it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, off a bridge for I think about 3 or 4 hours, by which time I was more sweat than man. And I thought, I could continue this, or I could not. And this was around the time where I actually started getting the idea for the book. And then I thought, well, I've had story ideas for so long. This is a good one. It's got probably the most meat on it than most of mine have. So why don't I run with it? So that's basically how that happened. Okay, good. That sort of ties in with Matthews. What's your biggest inspiration? When it comes to sort of literacy, everyone always says, were you inspired by J.K. Rowling? And I expect this a lot. Oh, Nathaniel, you're here. Oh, I didn't notice you. Oh, thank you for coming. Yeah, honestly, same with the yeah, you just get such a big buzz off stage. We do a local comedy show in Brompton, our village, and the buzz you get off there is so much better than anywhere else. It's not quite burlesque, but you never know. Maybe for shave. Yeah, so the biggest inspirations on the literacy ones, I'd say it's actually expanded a bit, but I would say that the original 2 were Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, especially The Discworld and Good Omens. But since then, his Dark Materials has been really useful, especially since that was involving a lot of almost sort of urban fantasy when you had the stuff not involved with Lyra. And then recently, literally in the last few weeks, I've been really into Frank Herbert and the Dune series, and that's really helped shape a lot of the, well, because of a lot of the supernatural stuff, there's a lot of darkness going on behind the scenes. So with the Bene Gesserit and all this stuff, that's really helped show how you can sort of show plans within plans, and how a society can get deep rooted with some really unpleasant characters. So yeah, they're probably the biggest inspirations, not J.K. Rowling, and I will contest that as much as I can. Not that there's anything wrong with Harry Potter, it's just... okay, Bellum. I love the way you wrote that. Who's your favourite of the Atemu? The Atemu are the ghosts. And yes, it is like choosing between children, because I love the idea of the sort of core cast of characters, and the 4 ghosts, just the most quirkiest characters I've ever written. And 3 of them based on real people in history, but very loosely. So you've had Jenny, who is like the Marilyn Monroe of this universe, and she very much started out as this sort of typical Marilyn Monroe type, but throughout the book she proves herself to be more capable than that and actually take control of the situation, which is great for her. Sky Bloodworth, who's this female pirate, and those 2 are in a relationship together, as much as there can be for ghosts. And she was inspired by was it Elizabeth Kilgrew? I think her name was, which was that a member of the aristocracy who turned to piracy. And I thought that was such a bizarre thing that happened in history, that the Queen, who was so anti-pirate, decided to basically pardon a member of the aristocracy who was a pirate. So I thought that was such a... And there's so little information on her. They don't even know when she died or if that particular person was her. It was a whole thing around there. So I thought I'll sort of pinch a bit of that and see where I can run with it. And then you have probably, I think, there was Abhay Singh, who's the third one. He's this Indian soldier who has a bit of a flair for the theatric and very much a take charge kind of guy. He is a lot of fun because it's sort of a very tame Captain Jack Harkness type of guy. And then probably the one who's most fun to write, I'll never be able to pick any of them, but I'll tell you the most fun to write was Thomas Hogarth, who's this Shakespearean actor from the period, sort of based on William Kemp, who will go off on these big Shakespearean soliloquies and everyone will just stare at him blankly. What are you talking about? So to actually wrestle any kind of sense from him is impossible. So that's definitely the inspiration behind them. And I'll answer the question by saying Hogarth is the most fun to write, but I love them all. If Trem was getting a live-action adaptation, who would you cast for who and why? I answer this question a lot, and it's always the same thing in that I would not cast anyone known for the main leads. I'd have Gabby and Trem be, go out into the UK, find anyone in, the acting schools or whatnot, and basically talent search someone for both of them. Then basically whoever you think could work in the roles. There's a character who comes at the end called Tremodor. I can see him being played. If anyone's seen iZombie, Raoul Cooley, who's the one of the leads in that, because he's got some brilliant charisma. Treman, who's the old grandpa character, the grandfather character of Trem, who sort of sticks in the shadows. He is... Oh, thank you, Amber. He is very much the instigator of a lot of the issues that go on. And the actor, it sort of changes, really. He was originally David Warner, but ever since I saw The Mandalorian, I can't not think of Werner Herzog as the character. Anyone else? There's a really, in the sort of similar vein of Steven Universe, where they've been casting singers, there's a very good singer who's not Ofra Hazar, she died. I can't think of her name now. Rhea Yarborough. Yeah, she sang the Battlestar Galactica theme. And now I don't know whether she's an actress or not, but she would definitely do brilliantly for the Manzazu Queen character who features a lot in these books. And she, I think she'd probably suit it best, especially since there's quite a motherly feel to her that I think she'd pull off well just with the singing. Anyone else got any questions? Right, what else? Are any of your characters inspired by a real person? I know self-insert is an absolutely dirty word, but I think Gabby, the way Gabby sort of handles situations is very much how I would like to handle situations. I'm rubbish under stress, but the way that she presents herself and the way that she is able to get into a situation, not think of the dangers or anything, and to sort of say, right, what he's doing, what can we do? How can we do it? Can we get through this without serious injury? I would definitely like to be that kind of person, but I'm not. If anything happens, I'm not there grabbing the sword and, charging into battle. I'm hiding under the table. So very much a fantasy recreation there. But I think the people that, actually, to be honest, it's book 3 that probably has the most characters that are inspired by real people. I know that my girlfriend, who's been an absolute pillar of support throughout all this, there's a character in the 3rd book who it's basically crossed her and Katsuki Bakugo from My Hero Academia and sort of merged them together, which is not a fair reflection of her at all, but that is sort of what we've come up with. And she is one of quite a few people who've been absolute pillars of support, and definitely Trem. Definitely. Oh, that reminds me, Trem's mum, Elizabeth Debicki. If you've seen her in Thank You Council, thank you Nathaniel, and see you on your next stream hopefully. The Elizabeth Debicki from Guardians of the Galaxy 2 as Trem's mum. That's the only other one that really speaks out in my mind. But yeah, Gabby's parents, they are definitely inspired by, well, Gabby's mum's definitely inspired by my mum. Again, because of her helpfulness and just being an all-round legend. Speaking of singing and music, are there any songs that you listen to for certain scenes or characters? Yeah, a lot. I have a writing playlist of about, well, over 100 tracks, and especially in the early days, I always found if I really wanted to get into writing a scene, find a piece of music that reflects that feel. I know in the chess musical, there's a really aggressive finale song in that, and that really helped with some fight scenes. Going to get a few more questions done and then do the prologue, because we are running out of time. Have you ever had an editing moment where you have had no idea what you were trying to say? What is it? Most of the time. If I didn't have my brilliant editing team / family, these wouldn't be published, because as much as I enjoy writing and how much my confidence is starting to grow as a writer, my grammar is absolutely appalling. So I would definitely need the help there. So I would say I get that probably twice, maybe 3 times every chapter, which doesn't reflect on me as a writer very well, but I'm glad that I have that support to help me. Right, I think that is the end of each question. And now on Twitter, I promised a giveaway. What's your approach when creating characters? I will get to that in a second. Basically, I put the question out, who here wants a free copy of the book, basically. And I have, through totally random means, plotted out who all liked the post and who wanted to be a part of it. So I have done that, and I can reveal that the winner is... Oh, I know. Don't worry, though, because both on Facebook and on here, there will be future giveaways of, and signed, I should say, of both. So this was only for book 1. So if anything, missing out on it is probably for the best, because now it means that you can get double threats quite soon. But the winner on Twitter is Miss Estella Mirai, and I butchered her name. Thankfully, she's not here to give me a stern talking to. So congratulations her, and I will post that once we are done. And now I think it is time to answer one more question. If you've got any more questions, drop them now, and we'll do it after the prologue reading. What is your approach when creating characters? I'm very... Again, it goes back to this sort of easily anally retentive way of doing plotting. Whenever I start a book, I always have to know where it begins, ends, what's in the middle, and how the characters fit into it. Now, when I do create characters, especially the more Manzazu that appear, they've all got quite similar names. So the more I sort of focus on the personalities and how defined I can make them, how sort of easy to identify just in their mannerisms or their way of speaking is for the best. So I try to focus on as much sort of nuance and personality as possible, like not fall within the same kind of character tropes, and sort of try to avoid tropes as much as possible. As much as of the 4 ghosts are sort of, foppish actor, 2 raring to go, sort of sword swinging, swashbuckling types, and timid but fierce. So as much as you do sort of find yourself going back to the core archetypes. If you can build them up more, flesh them out more, and sort of spend time working on the characters, almost sort of get to know them yourself and sort of flesh them out as much as possible, then that will really help. So, because you always sort of end up with, does the plot inform the characters or the characters inform the plot? So that's, I think, what a lot of authors need to work out for themselves, really. I think it's different depending on the book. It might not be the same from person to person. Right, so chapter. This will be the prologue. I was going to read the first chapter of this one, but I thought, since this has actually gone very well, actually, I was not expecting this to go as well as it did, but since this went so brilliantly, I'm actually going to hold off on that and do chapter 1 on another stream, because I was just going to do 1 to test the waters, and this has gone better than I expected, to be perfectly honest. Okay, so this will be the big first debut of any Trem Exiles related content online. And I tell you what, it's so much easier to read these ones because the typeset's been completely changed, and I am thankful for it. Okay, so your last reading for tonight. Trem Exiles, prologue, Get Out of My Memories. And thankfully, there's no real spoilers for this from Trem 1, so that's great. So if any of this intrigues you, I've trapped you into basically needing to buy book 1 in case you don't get any of it. I'm so evil. Prologue, Get Out of My Memories. Her cold hand pressed against the glass of the casket. She looked so at peace. It wasn't fair. The Menzazu standing over the casket closed her emerald green eyes, tears rolling down her face. It had been so long since she saw her sister open her eyes, speak to her, smile to her. She often wondered if she'd even wake from this seemingly endless sleep. Tremesa opened her eyes ever so slightly, looking down at her sleeping sister. Her jet-black hair had now turned grey. The scar across her face from the attack still looked like it cut deep over her eye and down her face. She still wore the navy blue and gold robes, indicating she was a Manzazu in the Queen's highest circles. Tremesa, meanwhile, had let her black hair grow messy and knotted. As she did not share the same level of distinction as her sister, her clothes were less vibrantly coloured robes. She glanced at the large ruby ring on her finger, peering into the casket till her eyes met with her sister's own identical ring. Pressing her forehead on the glass, she silently wished, hoped, prayed, to anyone who would listen, to help wake her sister up. But she feared that day will never come. She took a step back from the casket, her boots stepping in the ankle-deep pool of water that surrounded her sister's resting place. Blue and yellow flowers were placed in the pool, floating around the stone circle and casket. The Manzazuan crest was etched into the front of the container, set in gold. A tapestry of late family members hung above the casket, and thankfully, her sister's image had not joined them. The chamber the casket occupied was a small basement, with only candles to illuminate the darkness. One side table was set next to an oval-shaped pool of water, and sat atop was a small picture of the two Manzazu, alongside small sentimental items. A curved dagger, a book of pressed flowers, and a single leaf. From a distance she could see her own reflection line up perfectly with her sister's. Why did it have to be her? The other Manzazu looked to her sister like a tool. The explosion could have claimed anyone. Now all Tremesa was left with was her own wounds, both physically and mental, neither of which she felt would ever heal. Suddenly a chill crept across the room, chilling the grieving Manzazu to the bone. She glanced at the wall. A figure emerged from it. She recognized the figure almost immediately. His distinctive powers were enough to give him away. The Queen's ghost himself, Tremedon. He was taller than the grieving Manzazu, with a head full of greying hair. In human terms, he looked cold and uncaring. His brown eyes showed no sign of emotion, and when he spoke, his rough voice sounded vaguely Italian-American. "What are you doing here?" Tremesa asked, scowling. Her hands turned to fists. The Queen's aide put his hands up. Tremesa noticed he had the sword on his back. I'm here on official business. I'm not looking to cause any trouble. Anger was starting to build up faster and faster for Tremesa. Well, you've already caused that. What do you want? Tramadon glanced at the glass coffin, but as soon as his eyes landed on the resting figure, his gaze snapped back to Tremesa. She was a smart man, Zazu. If she thought he was here for her sister, it would be very hard to convince her otherwise. Euphrasia was put in serious danger. Someone opened an Ishtar gate and allowed several ghosts into the Styx. Tremesa's scowl barely shifted. I don't see what that has to do with me. We narrowed down the location of the Ishtar gate. It's within this area. Are you accusing me of this? She snapped. She had reached her breaking point. Tremesa had a noticeable burn mark across her face, courtesy of the Home Guard during the war. They interrogated her like a criminal. Since then, she found herself equal parts enraged and fearful of any of the Queen's legion of goons. Haven't you taken enough from me? Tremedon held out his arm. That's not it at all. If you just listen to what I have to say. Tremesa's arm shot out to the side. The antique dagger on the table flew into her hand. With her ruby thing on her finger, she drew her hand down the blade, causing a spark from the ring that set the dagger ablaze with a scarlet flame. She knew full well that with a blue flame was deadly to the corrupted souls of the Manzazu called Farrar, the red flames were quite deadly to living beings. Tremedon's arm dropped by his side. Do you really want to do this? He asked. He stared at Tremesa. There was clearly going to be no reasoning with her. You never got the easy assignments. All I need to know is if you know anything about the... Before he could continue, Tremesa drew her arm back and fired a curved, crescent-shaped bolt of red flame at him. Tremedon's eyes shut tight. The red fire shot through him and out the other side, with no physical signs of injury. Tremedon's powers gave him the ability to pass through solid matter, which could also turn his body into a less tactile state. Once he fully reformed, he reached back and pulled his sword from the scabbard on his back. Very well then. He took his hand, each finger clad in a multitude of different coloured rings. He slid his hand down the blade, igniting the red flames. The two figures stared each other down for a moment, both waiting for the other one to strike. A few tense seconds passed before the first move was made. Tremesa set another jet of fire at her opponent and charged at him. He was armed with a great sword, which meant that she knew he was at a disadvantage with a dagger. Tremedon had to alter his form to avoid the attack, which would leave him open. Sure enough, Tremedon phased, the fire doing nothing to him once again. As he reformed, he saw Tremesa was right on top of him. With a running jump, she held the dagger above her head. Tremedon blocked, using the front of the sword, red embers spitting off the blades. He pushed her away and regained his fighting stance. Tremesa staggered back, the force of the push causing her to stumble. She could hear Tremedon's feet. He was making himself ready to charge. To anticipate this, she flicked the dagger around so she was holding it in a reverse grip. Tremedon began running towards her, drawing his sword, ready to strike. Tremesa spun round and thrust the dagger, expecting it to strike against the Royal Aide's blade. It did not. Tremesa didn't even realise what had happened until she was staring at the sight before her. She had just plunged her blade right into Tremedon's chest. She began to stutter. Her hand began to shake as she was met with the cold gaze of the man she just stabbed in the chest. It was just like the gaze she got before, from the other man who burned her. Tremedon took Tremesa's wrist and pulled. The knife smoothly slid from his chest. He'd managed to phase just in time. Half a second either way and he would have been finished. He didn't mask the sigh of relief. His grip tightened on Tremesa's wrist, causing her to drop the dagger into the pool of water, the flames extinguishing with a hiss. Tremesa held her wrist and lowered her head, sinking to her knees. You take everything from me, don't you? She stuttered, slowly beginning to weep to herself. For the first time since arriving, Tremedon's cold, steely expression softened. He wasn't a monster. He was not the unfeeling dog of the Queen that she thought he was. He sat on the floor and looked at her, Tremesa turning away from his gaze. What happened to you was inexcusable. You shouldn't have had to endure that level of torment. It wasn't officially sanctioned. The Home Guard were acting on their own orders. If I'd have known, he began. You didn't, though, Tremesa replied. You knew he did and you still didn't act. That makes you just as bad. This wasn't an easy thing to take. But having risen up the social ladder, Tremedon was used to far worse. The Queen and her escorts will be arriving soon, so I need to know. The quicker I know, the sooner I'll be gone. Well, when you put it like that, I don't know anything. I had nothing to do with it. Tremeda wasn't the type to enact revenge out of spite. Tremedon knew her actions against him were in the heat of the moment. He felt guilty of such actions he'd been guilty of such actions plenty of times, especially in his youth. I believe you. Tremeza was expecting to fight her innocence all the way to Euphrasia, so to hear that caused her to lift her tear-streaked face. What do you mean you do? I mean, I believe you, he replied. There was never any doubt that you were to blame. All I needed to know was how many Ishtar gates are within a 50-mile radius of this place. Jameza's head tilted slightly. Well, there's the medic. She's nestled in the local human settlement, as is the defector on the pier. There may be one still active in the non-Manzazu household not far from here as well. There, not as bad as first appeared. It looked like Tremeza had demolished her own Ishtar gate and repurposed it for the chamber for her sister. Well, it made sense. Thank you. He stood up, brushing the stone off of his knees. There's one more thing I want from you. Tremeza looked up at him, her hands were still shaking. What is it? Tremedon returned the sword to the holster on his back. I can make sure that, as far as Euphrasia is concerned, you and your sister will not have to worry about any further intrusions. It was clear now that the river Euphrates was never coming back. Only the Ishtar Sentinel could maintain it, and she was in a coma, and had been for over 200 years. The outlook was not hopeful. A little sigh escaped Tremeza's lips. Thank you. She too got to her feet. I do apologize, I wasn't thinking straight. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her black robe. Tremedon looked to the sister. You know, there are still those in Euphrasia that have never given up hope. I know you won't want to give up either. The Sentinel's comatose body may have seemed peaceful, laying in the glass coffin, but beyond her physical body, she was anything but peaceful. The Sentinel floated in the warm waters of the river Euphrates, turning from her back onto her front, close to a standing position. She looked around. The tunnels of once green, vibrant vines and leaves had now turned into a never-ending, twisted spiral of dead branches and rotting vegetation. The colourful scene had now turned an unforgiving blue. As far as the Sentinel was concerned, she was just going to have to stay that way. She wanted to be alone. Any kind of interaction with others was just abhorrent to her. She looked down at the water. Ripples were forming once again, like something was disrupting it further upriver. Not again, she muttered. She swam above the water, her greying hair moving alongside her robes as if they were underwater. The Sentinel continued onwards, further down the seemingly endless tunnel. The deeper she went, the more she became alarmed. She could smell something. It wasn't what she should be smelling. Wood polish and smoke, specifically smoke from a train. The tunnel around her began to fade. The water below her washing away. She found herself in a simple wooden room with glass windows and painted white frames. It was night. No one was sat on the benches. It was all coming back to her, where she was. This was the night she left the family home to go to Euphrasia and become their pawn. As she stepped, she noticed she was still floating over the ground, her clothes and hair still moving sluggishly behind her movements. She continued on past the open door and onto the railway platform. A black tender engine was sat at the station, steam and smoke bellowing from its valves. She glanced at the clock that hung on the side of the small structure she appeared in. 1:45 a.m. It was exactly how you remembered it. Why are you showing me this? She called out to no one in particular. But I don't want you to go, came the voice of a young girl. The Sentinel turned her head towards it. Oh, that was just too cruel. On the platform were two girls, no older than 10. The Sentinel recognised them all too well. Herself and her sister. I don't want to go either, but they won't let me stay, came the tearful response from the younger Sentinel. She looked down at her younger self. Her face was free of scars, her hair was still jet black, and her eyes still looked so full of life. Unlike now. The younger Tremesa wiped away some of the young sentinel's tears. The older, more weary sentinel went to wipe her own, but stopped when her hand brushed against the scar trailing down her eye. When she left her family that day, she'd be entering a world where her destiny would be governed by others. The time she'd spent, alone in the river with only her memories, had turned her bitter to the world around her. She eventually had come to the realization that the world hardly needed her in it. Okay, well, promise you'll write to us, little Tremesa told her sister, who began mouthing the words her child began mouthing the words to the child's reply. Every day, I promise, both sentinels said in unison. When her previous self headed towards the soul train carriage, she took a step forward. No, don't do it, she called, but it was hopeless. In fact, that sense of hopelessness made it harder to endure the second time round, because she knew where that little girl was heading. She was heading for a life of servitude which would end in her slipping into a coma during a pointless war. It wasn't long before there were no more goodbyes. Not when the train had begun travelling into the night, leaving the tiny Tremesa standing on the platform, all alone. The sentinel hung her head, allowing herself a moment to let the emotions flood over her. Tears rolled from her face into the void beneath her feet, an inch gap between herself and the platform. Came a voice. The sentinel's eyes shot open as her head lifted. In front of her was a stranger, the very same clueless, confused-looking person as before. Both the sentinel and Gabby Morgan met eye to eye, staring silently at each other. This was the first time they were able to get a look at one another. The look of shock soon left the sentinel's face, it replaced instead with anger. Get out of my memories. Prologue. Quite full on it is too. And that is, I think, the end of me being hydrated. I believe that is the end of what we have set up for ourselves tonight. And I hope everyone enjoyed that, really. Oh, thank you, Sunny. Now, I don't know. Now, I definitely will be doing another one of these because this has been fun. I was really nervous beforehand, as my friends would let you know. But yeah, really enjoyed that. And I've had really good fun. So thank you, Caroline. And next time I'll probably see if I can get a few more questions from people who can't make it and do more of a sort of Q&A type video. As I've only got another chapter from book 1 to read. Otherwise, it either gets into spoilers or I'm reading every one of the books. Don't know whether, pardon me, I don't know whether anyone would appreciate that or not. So, on this YouTube account, you'll basically be expecting to see a few more videos come. Basically, I've decided to do some little videos that don't have any spoilers in them, thankfully, but to sort of explain a bit of the world around it, basically, some world building, some lore. I've got free setup, I believe, and the fourth one is already online, and it's basically a condensed version of the plot. Audiobook person. I know I've got enough radio connections through the family that maybe someone would be interested. I mean, they're not the longest books in the world, so an unabridged audiobook won't be 18 hours long like some of them. So yeah, keep an eye out on this channel for more updates, and if there are any more future live streams, I will social media the heck out of them. Very impressed that at our peak we've actually managed to get 10 viewers, and I was not expecting that much. So yeah, anyone interested in these, they are in the link description. Book 2 is now officially online for release. Thankfully, Amazon's now worked out all the kinks. And yeah, thank you everyone for getting involved in this. Thank you for everyone who asked questions. Thanks for everyone who came and who didn't find me eye-wateringly, tediously boring. So thank you, everyone. And see you next time, whenever that is. I might try and I'll experiment with the idea of maybe making this monthly, but I'm not quite sure. Since I've only got one more chapter to read, don't know whether it will be sort of more conversationally between the chat and me and not. And we'll see. I'll give it some thought and sort of get some feedback from everyone and see where we go from there. So thank you, everyone. And it's been a blast. Hope you all have fun too. And see you next time. Everyone have a fantastic day. Stay safe. Wash your hands. And yeah, be seeing you. Yes, and the stream can only keep this post for so long.